Welcome back to the Exorcist Bestiary. Welcome back to the Exorcist Bestiary, your premier podcast on all things Holy Spirit-led exorcisms, inner healing, the spiritual world, spiritual warfare. I am your host, Amity, and everybody in my TikTok comments tell me all the time that I look like Drew Barrymore. This is your podcast host, Jamin, and everybody in his TikTok comments and me every day in real life all the time tell him he looks like Seth Rogen. And this,
is that right?
I guess so. Is your podcast host, Tasha. And nobody has said a celebrity lookalike that she has. So
she looks like her daughter, but I guess that's kind of...
She does look like her daughter. Or, well, probably her daughter looks like her.
Also probably true, yes.
But I guess if you have one that's nice and not mean, because somebody in my TikTok comments the other day told me that I look like the little cave girl from the Croods, and that's rude. Don't comment. That's crazy to tell a human woman that she looks like an animated cave girl. Don't say that. But if you have a celebrity lookalike that you're like
non-human woman.
We totally did not get that comment in our Exorcist TikTok either.
We sure did.
We
and
love
you deleted it before you thought I saw it, but I did saw it.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, today we are talking about one of my favorite books on earth, the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, friend of the podcast. His portrait is hanging on the wall. Famous supporter of the Exorcist Bestiary. He always said that. He has always said how much he loves our podcast.
Oh my gosh.
We do not do the resurrection of the dead around here, just to be clear.
No, he told me in my dreams.
He
was
not helpful.
Friend of the... That was a joke. I'm not speaking to dead people. That was a joke. Sorry for starting the podcast off with insane energy. I am so sleep deprived because I've been talking to C.S. Lewis all night.
Maybe I should start the episode. I don't know.
No, that was perfect. No.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, keep it going.
Tasha, you've read a little bit of the book, correct?
I have, yes.
Jamin, you probably have it memorized.
No. I went through it once with the audiobook, which whoever that guy is who recorded that audiobook he's the guy that was supposed to record that audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
He's got this whole yes,
yeah.
Like that's how
it's really scary. It freaks me out.
Oh, have you listened to it?
Yes.
Have you listened to it?
Have you listened to it?
We become
Absolutely.
British when we talk about
because
CSS.
I can't read very well, and so I read this book one time, and then I was like, I want to read this again, and I can't because I can't read very well, and so I listened to it on the audiobook.
Which I have a feeling the way that this episode is going to go down is I audiobooked it once. You've listened.
I've read it once, and I've listened to it 3 times.
And how long ago was that?
Well, I listened to some of it last week because I knew we were going to film this.
Okay, and then Tasha has recently gone through 9 chapters of it or something. And this is the part where probably I'm like, oh yeah, it said that? Like, 'cause I haven't been through it in a while, and Tasha's just going to be like, oh, I love this part.
But like,
that's great. I don't remember that at all.
You're the world's biggest C.S. Lewis fanboy.
I love C.S. Lewis. It's true.
Wow, and you haven't even read his book last week. That's crazy. I did.
There's a lot of Lewis scholars out there. They're the fanboys with the degrees to prove it. So, yeah.
Anyway, so if you haven't read the Screwtape Letters, basically, this is a book that C.S. Lewis wrote. It was very interesting. Honestly, it can be kind of difficult to read because it's a fantasy book that he wrote from the perspective of demons. So the book consists of a series of letters of a greater demon and a lesser demon, an uncle and a nephew, writing back and forth to each other. There's Screwtape, and that's the uncle, and then there's Wormwood, not Wormtongue. I'm reading.
Maybe it is Worm.
No, it's not because Wormtongue is Tolkien.
Yeah.
Wormwood is the nephew, and the nephew is going through the process of trying to lead Christians away from God. He's got one specific Christian that he's been like assigned to lead astray, and he is writing letters to his uncle, who is an older and more experienced demon, and he's like, oh, how do I do this? And then the uncle is writing to him being like, oh, here's how you keep him out of church. Here's how you keep them isolated. Here's how you keep them apathetic. All these different kinds of things. Basically giving advice to the younger demon on how to lead Christians away. And C.S. Lewis wrote this for the purpose of being like, hey, Christians, this is how demons work. This is the kinds of things that they're going to do. These are the traps that they're going to lay for you. Like, be smarter than what the demons are trying to tell you and that kind of stuff. And from my understanding, it was kind of controversial when he released it because he was like this big scholarly guy. And then he was like writing fantasy books about demons talking to each other, which is like, I guess, not a good look.
Yeah, when you work in the professional field of scholarship and education, when you suddenly have on your resume the guy who wrote the book about demons in a world that did not believe in that, or at least a culture, scholarly, professional field that gave no credit to that. Yeah, it didn't look great for him. He was kind of known as the demon guy, which I know a little bit about what that's like.
Yeah, so. You're known as the demon guy.
Yeah, we'll get to our...
Or the alien guy.
And the alien guy.
Same thing, maybe.
And the speaking in tongues guy.
We'll get to some of the exorcist conversations, because this is an exorcist podcast. We'll talk about where Lewis is actually right on point and whatnot in a bit. But a few other things that I think are helpful to note with this book is, one, yes, it didn't do him a lot of favors. Two...
It's so good.
Two, it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Three, he didn't like writing it.
I can imagine that he wouldn't. You'd have to be in a pretty crazy headspace to like be able to.
Well, that was in the
talk
intro.
about this.
Is
it? Yeah.
Yep.
He talks about.
This is an old version. It's in the intro of that, huh?
Yeah. How he did not like writing it. How people have always asked him to write it, and he said, one. For myself, I'm not going to write it. But two, I also think that people don't need to read more of it.
Yeah. This is about the sequel people wanted him to write, right?
People wanted him to write.
Yeah. And he was saying that back when books cost only $2.95. So if he was feeling that way back then, he did eventually write one thing. He wrote a toast to Screwtape or something. It's just like one little chapter type thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he didn't want to write anymore. He, again, there's something almost very spiritual about this book. It feels when you're reading it like God actually, the Holy Spirit allowed him a glimpse into the way that demons think to write this out. Because this is spot on. If you're looking for a book on spiritual warfare, which everyone always is, Screwtape Letters is actually right there. If you're wondering how demons work, that's the one. If you're looking for like logistics and like how to get them out and stuff, sure, that's in another book. But if you want to know how they work, it's literally just the thoughts that they pass along to each other, trying to screw you up until you're more and more damaged and bonded by their ways of thinking that you don't even know how to get out anymore. So
it is, I will say, it can be a difficult read because it's very icky, especially if you're somebody who is kind of very sensitive to things that are spooky and scary, and you don't enjoy a lot of those conversations. It can be a challenging book to tackle, but it is really, really good, and it is worth the read if you can work your way through the stuff that's yucky.
I had three things earlier.
Then
you added one that it was so good.
It was so good. It also inspired my favorite album that was ever written. It's called Dear Wormwood. It's by the Oh Hellos. Give it a listen. Shout out Oh Hellos, friends of the podcast.
That is a great album.
It's so good.
That was, I guess, now our fourth point.
That's
so
our
the
fourth
fifth point.
The fifth point.
Occasionally, you're going to come across memes of quotes from this book that they're not real. They don't exist. It wasn't Lewis. So, just a heads up. It's funny because people will put out like political things and they wrote it in this style. Yeah. They're like, if only we had read Lewis a long time ago. It's like, that's not Lewis. That's not what he sounded like. That's just somebody else wrote Dear Wormwood.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. So that happens from time to time. Just, check out the book for yourself.
Gotta defend the bestie.
Yeah.
He would never say that. He
Yeah.
would tell it to me in a dream.
I'm curious because this is Tasha's first time reading it.
Yes, I want to know your thoughts.
Yeah, take us in. You're not done yet. How does it end? We don't know.
I don't know, actually. I'm wondering if there's a twist.
I know.
But a couple things. One, I've discovered that I can only personally read it during the day and while my children are at school because it just puts me in that mind frame. And a huge thing that it's done for me is it's taking demons from the realm of impersonal to personal. Like, I think about it like, you know, for me, that is just not a question. There are angels and there are demons. They're there. But what is their role? And the role to me has always been kind of impersonal. You know, oh, they created cigarettes and they created drugs and they created alcohol, you know, because they want, you know, people to get addicted. And, you know, they did all that stuff out there. And I deal with it in my life because I'm a sinful person and, you know, I just need to be better. But this brings it into the realm of there's a specific demon that is, you know, looking at me and saying, hey, you know, how can we create that separation between her and the enemy, which is what they call it. And so just having that like personal attack, you know, it was a whole new realm for me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That they are, I think, as Amity said earlier, like assigned to you. They're working on you. And actually, I've saw this in one deliverance session. There was a really strange thing where I'm leading someone through inner healing so that we can get the demon out. And someone else in their life is perfectly, and I mean perfectly, doing all of the wrong things all of the time to reinforce this person's inability to heal. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, how does this work? The demons are just jumping around between them. Like, okay, this is what they're working on now. Let's go to the other person and then like create some havoc and then hop back. You know, I'm thinking, is that how it works? So like, because this happened so many times and it was uncanny how perfect it kept lining up to destroy things. I made the demons manifest and I said, are you messing around with the other person? And they were just like, we are not assigned to them. And I said, you tell me the truth because this is too crazy. You tell me the truth in the name of Jesus. Are you messing around with the other person? And they just said, we are not assigned to them. I did this like 3 times. And it was
so creepy.
Well,
That's so gross. I don't like that.
It was clear to me after like grilling to make sure this wasn't a lie. Like they weren't playing me. Now,
they weren't assigned, but they were writing letters.
They were writing letters.
Now, there are times where they used the person that they were assigned to. They put them in some awkward scenarios that created damage. And like they texted me one morning and they were just like, oh, we set them up for failure today. And I was like, okay, that's a weird text to get. But like in that case. The demons
were texting you?
Yeah, that's happened a few times. They texted me like, we set them up for failure today.
He says it so casually. Okay.
Sorry, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've seen. They're like, we set them up for failure today. And in that particular case, they were doing only what they were capable of doing within that person. But they were clear that they were not assigned to the other person. Now, it still was uncanny how often it was unhelpful. So I don't know if it's possible that somehow demons in another person can have some kind of spiritual awareness of the other person and they work off that. But I do believe after I grilled them enough, they weren't hopping back and forth. And so this book right here is this kind of question. If demons are assigned to a person and you are focused on one person, and you can't just willy-nilly go control everyone else around you to make a mess, then how do you figure out how to really mess up your one person and damage the relationships around you along the way? So Lewis does a good job by operating in that idea that here I am in one body trying to mess this up.
What I'm seeing of the theme is that demons work in extremes, like religion. No religion is an extreme, and a lot of only religion and no relationship is an extreme. And to hear that a demon would push you into religion to mess you up, it's mind-bending.
That's a trippy chapter.
I have seen, I have had to remove demons from people that have more or less capitalized upon Christianity to screw them up. Mm-hmm. So, yes, that does happen. Which kind of messes with you a little bit, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Like, how are they using all of this Christianity stuff to twist it enough to like, find enough bondage to stay there? And why do I have to lead people through repenting from erroneous understandings of Christianity in order to remove demons? But it's true. They'll work in whatever space they can. It was actually, my old mentor said that one of the hardest demons to remove is religious demons. And I can see why, because we put so much stake into our religious beliefs. Like when you look at the way people react around like politics and religion, you're just like, this is the kind of extremes in which people think that it just seems like sometimes there's something off. Like this was an extreme reaction to a conversation on something, you know, because it's become religiousized. Yeah.
And that seems to be a common theme through all of the chapters in this book, and the way that demons work is there's a lot of taking something that wouldn't be a problem and twisting it until it is. So they take Christianity and they take something that's good and they twist it to a nefarious purpose, and they warp what it's supposed to be, and then it leads you away from the actual design for organized religion. They'll take like alone time with God and they'll twist it and they'll warp it into like isolationism and not doing your Christian walk with other people. They'll take they'll take a lack of feeling and twist it and magnify it, so now that there's like apathy in place of passion and all those kinds of things. Because no one is going to be listening to a demon that's like, hey, I'm a demon, it's time for you to do some crazy, freaky stuff. Like, no, obviously get away. Don't talk to me. No, that's
I feel
crazy.
like that's in the book somewhere, isn't it? Like we can't just go in and tell them to murder people.
Yeah.
We have to start
you have
somewhere.
to be subtle. You have to take something that a person trusts and a person knows and it's something that can be good, and you have to twist it, or they have to twist it until you are still in the headspace of thinking this is good, and it is not. It's the opposite of that. It's leading you away, because that is so much easier to trick people than to just like come right out and be like, ah.
Yeah. Right now we're in the presidential election is, soon. If you're hearing this out of context. Yeah. But I see my feed, and on either side there are, and my feed is mostly Christians because that's mostly my friends. And the things that are coming out of their mouth, I'm like, have we taken a break from being a Christian for a couple months? I mean, like, is this a thing? And I think it's the passion that we have for our country that is good, but taken to an extreme can be damaging.
Yeah.
And completely religiousized. The last picture I saw someone share was one presidential candidate with angel wings and the other one with devil horns. Yeah. And I was just like, this is not how this works.
Yeah.
And then every grandma on Facebook is like, repost. Spread the good word. This is so true. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty good
Screwtape made that meme. He put it out there on purpose.
It's a very good glimpse into the way in which demons work, not just because it shows you just the way that we just keep tweaking thoughts, because that's how demons work. Like, stop getting caught up in the Craziness of exorcism, yes, ridiculous things happen, weird manifestations. I've seen a lot of weird stuff. I just talked about demons texting me. I get it. But like also...
I'm sorry, I don't like it.
Also, if I was to just explain spiritual warfare to you on the most basic level, this is it. It's just conversations in the head being illuminated into tricky corners until you can't get out. And they are tricky. They have been around for thousands of years, like it just varies from each one. And they know the way in which humans work. So I was working with one person, and they had this demon that represented a certain field. If you think of demons as they specify in themes, that's more or less how they work. They choose a theme, they take their master course in it, they get educated on it, then they spend their life messing people up on that theme.
When you say a theme, you mean like a demon of shame or a demon of greed?
So a demon of shame is focused on shame. It's learned how to make people feel shame. It's learned all the different ways in which you can twist shame to make it even more twisty until you get to the point of that demon being like, all right, I've capitalized on this enough. What partners well with shame? I don't know, let's just say drinking or something like that. Okay, I'm going to bring in another demon, my pal over here who always leads people into intoxication to try to deal with their shame. Get in here, buddy. I've created space for you. We're going to trip this person up. That person then trips up with that, and Buddy comes in, and now they're roommates, and they're working together to destroy this person's life in another way. And now you've got this addiction, but it's grounded in the work that shame has already done. And shame has to be taken care of in order to move out the addiction at the same time. And then another demon comes, like you just keep thinking themes expanding and growing out. But they also, they're partnered up sometimes. So
yeah,
I had this demon show up at one point, and I asked the demon's name, and it was this shadowy blob that they saw. And I asked the demon's name, and it gave me a name, and I Googled it, and it means shadow. And I was like, well, okay. So
creative.
Yeah. But at the same time that I read that, I was also like, is this demon shadowing the other demon on this topic? Because it seemed like it didn't talk. It's like it was just present to witness and learn and grow in this theme here. And I'm like, is it shadowing the other one? And then before I can say, is it shadowing the other one, the person says, it says it's here on a student visa. I'm like, well, I was just about to say that. It's shadowing the other demon. And so
that's crazy.
Yeah, but the other one was like the master. It was the one that's used to the theme. And here's this other one that needs to grow in it, apparently, and is studying under the greater one to figure it out.
That's like what I do with you, but evil.
Well, but like as above, so below, it actually in this... Sorry, you're not used to that phrase, or did I use it wrong?
No, isn't that's a movie about the Paris catacombs?
Yeah, it was also just a phrase.
That was scary.
So. Oh, we'll do inner healing on that later. But in that particular case, it's like if I have something that I know really well, I teach it to other people. Yeah. It happens that in the spiritual realm, the same thing happens, Why that other demon didn't know that theme as well as the other one, I don't know. Is it a new demon? What is a new demon? We've talked about some of that in some other episodes. And can it, is it switching themes? What's the case? I have no idea. There was also another person I was working with where God actually added an adjective. Like he's rarely ever told me what I'm up against when I'm dealing with a demon. And there was one where he added in an adjective to say, this one has some experience. I just want you to know that ahead of time was the vibe I was getting. And it's like, okay, so we're actually up against something that probably has a lot more weight on how to know how to screw people up than some of the other demons that I've come across. There's demons of shame that I found Jesus got rid of very easily. And then there were other shame demons that were a bit stronger along the way. That was like, okay, so we're making our way up in levels of shame here, But they work together. They train each other. Lewis, again, was right in his understanding of that. So, and Lewis did have an interest in the occult. He did not pursue it, but he talks about one of his like more or less his memoir. He talks about how like that was something that tempted him a lot. Mm-hmm. Once he started believing that the supernatural was real, he had a kind of a tick to want to know how it worked, and he had to like repent of that and run away from that. So that being said, I find it very intriguing that guy who was trying not to like fall into that stuff actually captured this so well. Just part of the way that it just feels like the Holy Spirit kind of partnered with him in some way to give us all a glimpse into how demons work, which is why he hated writing it. Can you imagine just thinking about that all the time? What am I going to write about today?
Demons.
How will I make someone more lustful? Well, I could think of 18 ideas. Why can I think of 18 ideas? Why am I writing this book?
Yeah, low-key, I would not be able to. I could barely read it.
Well, that's why you didn't want to write a sequel. Yeah.
So now that we know like a little bit about the book, what the premise of the book is, some of the content that it covers, highly recommend reading. It's very, very good. I feel like we've said that a lot of times, but I'll say it again. Very good. Highly recommend reading. But this isn't just like, here's what's in the book, because this book was designed by Lewis to be a tool. Like, that's why he wrote it, is to let Christians know, like, this is how they'll get you. Don't let them get you. So how does this book become a tool in the context of deliverance? Like, what can we learn from this book? How does it help us? How does this interplay with the stuff that you do?
I remember when I was reading it, before I was even doing deliverance, there were a lot of kind of aha moments for me, where I was like, I either know someone who's been through that, or I've been through that myself. There's also moments where it's like, wow, I didn't realize how that is a twist on my mind with the way that things should be, especially because he writes a lot to like, here's how we screw up Christians and without making them unchristian. Like there's times where he kind of professes this, like, if they must be Christians, then here's what we're going to do to them. And I appreciate that Lewis recognizes that demons are at work within the body, not just out there somewhere. And those are the ones that kind of like catch my attention of like, oh yeah, that really is kind of like when I do that, I'm tweaking like the original intent that God had, or I'm leaning in a different direction. In my mind, I would think it'd be helpful to recommend some people going through deliverance just to say like, hey, you're seeing the weird stuff because we're going through this. But in the everyday that you've been experiencing normal life for the last several years, this is how it's been working. And if you want to get free of this stuff, then you got to deal with just the everyday taking every thought captive to figure out where every thought you're having is leading you. And if it's a twist on God's intent for you, because as the Holy Spirit makes things clear as you're healing, you start to say to yourself, oh man, I didn't realize how far off I was in that thought and how it's been twisted from the original. So I would think it would be helpful just like, if you could get into the mind of your enemy so you knew that the way they were working, that's what this would do.
Having gone through some sessions and, in the middle of one session, I was working on this one theme, and I hit what I, thought was a high point and some victories. And then I left, and throughout the week, there was this one persistent thought that I was struggling with. And it was a thought that I didn't necessarily want to share. But when I finally did, my sponsor and Jamin were able to say, okay, this is the enemy. This is the enemy speaking this into your life. This is what they want you to think. This is the truth of the matter is, you may not feel it right now, you may not get it right now, but this is the truth, and speaking that over the lies that were continually, being spoken in my head and I kept on hearing and struggling with, just that struggle being made personal, I think, is something that we can take from the Screwtape Letters, that, there are lies that we are listening to that are not necessarily coming from ourselves.
Yeah. Once you recognize that those are not you, that's always a great point to be like, well, if it's not me and it's not Jesus, then I probably shouldn't be listening to it. Whereas most of us are just convinced that it's us. And that's actually been the way that demons have messed me up for a long time. In college, that was exactly what they did. Plant a thought in my head, accuse me of having the thought, and then have me on my knees repenting for how evil I am for having thought that. Even though I didn't think it, they put it there. And I might have already shared that story before. But it wasn't until someone I knew one day said, one day I was walking through a store and I had this horrible thought about the person in front of me, and I realized that wasn't my thought, and I told her to go to hell or something, and then I just went on with my day. I was like, wait a minute. Is that what I've been doing? Because that was their cycle. Like, some demon somewhere taught this demon, go ahead, put a bad thought in his head, then blame him for it, and then take him to Jesus.
And that's not to say that we're not accountable for our actions or our thoughts, but there's a difference. There's a difference with something that you can't get out of your head that just kind of screws itself into the gaping wound that you have in your life, that you just know, I didn't know the truth, but I knew this is a lie, and I need to share this and get help with this. So there's a difference.
Yeah. In this particular case that I was dealing with myself, it was literally, hi, Jamin. Think of the worst thing you could possibly think of right now. Oh, I can't believe you just did that. And so it was like this trick. I'm like, you're right. How depraved am I? But like, you put the thought there, not me, Yeah. And that was that one's trick. Whereas, you do have to be discerning. Like, we all do have bad thoughts that we need to take captive and take before Jesus. And my problem was that I was not discerning, and I thought every single thought was mine when I was falling for a trap over and over every day. Yeah. How about you, Amity? How's this book work for you in deliverance?
I don't really do deliverance.
How is it helpful to you as you sort out how?
Well, it is. I mean, I'll just kind of echo the sentiment of it's good to know what you are up against. I think that especially in matters of spiritual warfare, there is a lack of, not maybe a lack of interest, but there's a lack of support in the capital C church for discussions about spiritual warfare. That's not the case for every group. That's not the case for every church, every denomination, what have you. But as an overall arching theme, people are like, demons. Oh, no. We're not talking about that. That's gross. That's spooky. Don't even think about it. Or they'll be like, oh, demons, well, it doesn't matter because you're a Christian, so they're not really going to affect you. And spiritual warfare, yeah, sure, the Bible talks about that, but we sure don't. And so it's kind of like there's not a good way to know how to deal with spiritual warfare because there's not a lot of people talking about spiritual warfare. And so then when you come to a book like this, where it's like, oh, this is super freaky realistic to the way that demons operate in the real world, then it's just another resource to be like, I know what I'm up against. So the same thing that you were saying, like I was reading this book and I was getting to chapters being like, oh, I do that. Oh my goodness. I didn't even realize that was something that I do. I didn't even realize that was something that I should be thinking a little bit more critically about when I like think those thoughts or make those decisions or da-da-da-da. And like, what is motivating me to make those decisions? And all of a sudden you become aware of what you're up against. Now you can be better equipped to take those thoughts captive. You can be better equipped to go through the process of healing. Because you know how they're tricking you. Like if you know what the trap is, it's not a trap anymore. If you know what the trick is, it's not a trick anymore. It's just something that you can be like, nope, you've tried that before. It's not going to get me this time.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a famous quote in here, I think, but I don't remember it. You guys recently read it.
I'll find
somewhat. Does any of this sound familiar? Convince them that you don't even exist.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's in the.
Yeah, it's like one of the tricks is if they don't know we're here, then they think they're just dealing with their own thoughts and I'm adding words into it, but I remember a quote in that general direction. And that's kind of the American twist, I think, on or the British in this case. You go to other countries, it's not even a question. It's just like, well, yeah, of course demons are real. We see them every day. Yeah. But part of the, I feel like, cultural twists that demons have kind of unifiedly, that's not a word, unificationally,
Unitedly?
That's the one. One of the like American twists I feel like demons have unitedly taken is like, they don't think we're real. Keep us on the down low for the most part, because then we can really mess them up and not be pinpointed. Like it's actually kind of the dream. If I'm a demon and I want to mess you up, my greatest technique is for you to not know I'm here.
Yeah.
And that's a trick that keeps us all stumbling a lot, both in and out of the church. Yeah.
I know I said in the podcast about dreams that we're in a war that a lot of people don't know about, and we have tools and, Jesus has already won this war. We just have to claim the victory over it. And I think one of their greatest weapons is not even letting people know that they're in war and that, this is just the way that I am. This is just the way that my brain works. This is just my personality, and it's not. It's things preying on you.
Yeah. And when you don't know they're there, basically to kind of say what you said, like, we can own them. They are us. I know you just said that, but that's like, I know one person that kind of comes at me boldly a lot and is just like, I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, this is me, and this is the way Jesus made me, and this is how I tell people how things actually are, and God uses me like that. I'm like, there's no fruit in this, like there's no love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. Like you might be owning yourself, or you might be owning some brokenness. I wish you would take this to Jesus and let him own it, because it's very painful when you exert it on others. And so, like, again, even within the church, we can take some of that brokenness, own it as like a Jesus thing, and then just kind of thrust it upon other people. It's just unhelpful. So it takes a lot of energy to kind of pinpoint those things, which is why counselors, therapy, exorcism, anything within the line of inner healing is going to be helpful to you figuring out what kind of thoughts that bubble up in your head are healthy and belong with Jesus, and which ones are actually the absence of that. Because with Christians, demons are always going to find a way to try to religiousize it. Well, that's, if Jesus is your greatest love, then they need to operate under a lie that makes them look like they're obedient to Jesus, right? Yeah. That's like shame turns into repentance. Yeah. And like Jesus, like, I already forgave that, but the demon's like, no, he didn't. Like, no, he didn't. That's it reminds religious.
Me. It's like a comical image, but you think of like there's like the devil and the angel on the shoulder, and they're fighting back and forth.
Kronk.
Yeah, literally. But sometimes that's what it feels like. Sometimes that's what it feels like, because I will hear the same truths over and over and over and over again from Jesus, being like, this is what's true, this is what's true, this is what's true, this is what's true. And I go, oh yeah, okay, that's what's true. And then it takes like one little guy over here is like, but what if it wasn't true? And I'm like, no, you're so right. What if it's not true? Yeah. And Jesus patiently, lovingly, wonderfully, of course, is like, no, this is what's true. This is what's true. Yeah. This is what's true. And it goes over and over and over again.
Yeah. That's the Emperor's New Groove. Kronk and those little...
Emperor's New Groove, famous friend of the podcast.
Great.
Kronk. I wish that would
Kronk
be
is
awesome.
going to be on next week's episode, actually.
We have lots of friends, besties.
Yeah, well, look what I can do. No, he's got a
He's
point.
got a point.
I don't think that has anything to do with anything.
There's this one time in my healing journey that we uncovered something that I needed to get rid of because it was really messing with me. But the way that it was presented to me was that it was a protector in my life. That this thing was protecting me. It was keeping me safe. And I actually had some very nice feelings toward it. And we
Toward,
had
like the demon.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we had to get through that and to see it as it was. And, when I finally did, like the disgust was just so prevalent. And it was just the switch from, this is something that's protecting me, keeping me safe. This is something good in my life, to this thing has been holding me in bondage, and it's colored my life in this way, in this way, in this way. And the fact, that I allowed that, and in some cases even held it close, it was just, not good.
Yeah.
Demons are twisters.
Yes.
That is their whole, number one. Every house party they go to, they're pulling out that game. They are expert twisters. And, that's the number one thing, is they'll take
Game of the
something like that
podcast.
that's good, and they'll take something like that, and they twist it.
Yeah.
No one's listening to a demon that's like, hey, go be evil. They
Yeah.
have to be like, no, go be good. And then secretly it's bad.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I think what Tasha said was really important. In that particular case, it twisted things to tell you, I'm protecting you, I'm taking care of you. So when you discover, this is the source of something that's been protecting me, your first thought is going to be maybe something like thank you, or you've been watching out for me. Maybe something that feels strangely, then you're like, wait a minute, it's a demon.
Yeah.
And then I have to reorient myself. Then it's been lying to me.
Yep.
And when you have that revelation, that's where the demon goes from the Satan masquerading as an angel of light
Yep.
to suddenly seeing it for all it's worth. And it's like, you have been destroying my life and just wanted a body to be in, because it doesn't seem like they like being outside of them. And you wanted to report home that you destroyed my life successfully when it was over, and you've just been saying whatever you can so that you can keep living here. It's like, this is a parasite. This thing hasn't been telling me anything.
And even in the dreamscape, it changed forms.
Yeah, you saw it for what it was.
It was trippy.
Yeah, well, that's what these demons and Screwtape Letters kind of do to some extent, is how can we make them accept us, pull us close, and embrace us, and think that we're on their side. And that's part of what's trippy about it when you read it, it's because you're like, I could see myself paying attention or agreeing with these if I was not careful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with that said, Screwtape Letters, if you haven't read it, it's well worth the read. I do think there are, like Tasha said, there's kind of precautions in how you read it. I blazed through the audiobook in a few sittings, and it's a lot to take
You
in.
listen to it on 2 times speed.
I do. But listening to that much darkness at one time. No. Listen to that much darkness at one time is a lot. But it's also this checks out. This is the kind of thing that every human can admit to going through at some point. And this is why the Bible makes such a big deal about guarding your thoughts. Because demons have, for however long they've been alive, just training each other how to trip you up in your thoughts. And the weird manifestation stuff, a lot of times that doesn't happen until you've figured them out and you're trying to remove them. Suddenly they're like, we've been found out. Let's just...
Quick, set something on fire.
Taunt them. Do whatever you can. That stuff happens and they're like, oh, you really didn't like me this whole time, did you?
Yeah.
I mean nothing to you. So, with that being said, read the book, I guess is what I'm saying.
And also just be aware, be cautious, be careful, and be discerning. Be discerning with other people as well. The book will highlight that one of the main tools that demons will use is isolation. And I think about so many situations in my life where I was under attack, and those attacks would not have landed or done as much damage if it was something that I had said out loud to literally a single other person who loves Jesus and loves me. Because there would be times where I'd be like, oh my goodness, like all this stuff is crazy, and I'll like say it out loud to Jamin, and Jamin will be like, demon, actually, that's actually so clearly a demon. I'm like, wait, you're right, it is. And so like, this is something that, especially if you are being opened up to the fact that demons are out there for the first time, because a lot of people are, because we don't talk about this kind of stuff in churches very often. A lot of people think that demonic is only like, ooh, heads are spinning around and stuff is floating in the room, and it's like goo is pouring out of the walls. I don't know. Like, people think that that's what it is, and it's not. It's like thoughts in your head. If you're a Christian, it's devoted Christians loving God, walking with God, working on their relationship with God, getting the thoughts in the back of their mind that are keeping them in bondage. That's what spiritual warfare is. And so, speaking about those things with wise people, with people who will help you discern, with people who will help you pray through it, like, that is the way to fight back.
Yeah. I think you just wrapped up the podcast as my guest there, so go ahead and do your thing.
That has been another episode of The Exorcist Bestiary. We're your hosts. We love C.S. Lewis, famous friend of the podcast, along with others.
In the afterlife, apparently, in Amity's dreams, where she will soon go see him.
Woo!
And
I just want to clarify, if you've made it
dreams.
through the whole podcast, that was a joke. If you cut out halfway, I'm going to seem crazy, but that was a joke. I don't talk to ghosts. I would never. That scares me. Anyway, what was I saying? This has been another episode of The Exorcist Bestiary. We'll see you next time.
All right. Make the loud noises happen, Amity.
Amity.
I'm so nervous.
I love that girl.
I'm so tired. I'm so sleepy. You need to cast a demon out of me first before we do this.